Good evening, dear friends. Welcome to online lecture series for the preparation of examination for the post of assistant professor in government first grade colleges. Today it is our seventh lecture, and we have been discussing the concepts in literary criticism and theory. And we have with us Dr. Srikanth sir, who will be continuing from where he left his discussion yesterday. And sir has asked me to arrange for one or two more classes in case they are needed. We will do it accordingly, sir. No problem, because literary criticism and theory, they need a lot of discussion and it takes a lot of time to explain the concepts. So yes, maybe we can schedule the classes once the classes of all other resource persons are over. So we'll let you know, sir.
Right, sir.
So once again, I welcome you to this lecture, sir, and over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So, good afternoon, viewers. Today I welcome you to the second class of this lecture series, and in that I have been speaking on literary criticism and literary theory of the post World War II, and yesterday, there were some doubts and questions. I just would like to complete and give a reply to them, and then I'll move on to carry on with the topics. So, yesterday, someone asked me to just focus even on this minor critics. See, the time is a constraint. That's the reason I'm just talking on those literary critics only who have been, I'm going to say, they made themselves to be capable of, to be the part of the great canon of literary criticism. So the time is a constraint. That's the reason I'm not talking on the minor critics. And the second one is that many people, they asked me to provide the list of books that can be used for study and for references. So the list will be handed over to Professor Akshay Yadi sir, and that will be given after this session. And one more thing I would like to tell you all is that uh, I cannot complete all the topics just because you know it how vast literary criticism and literary theories are, and each and every literary theory, at least it requires 8 days to ponder upon or talk on. One literary theory is equal to maybe around, I'm just superficially telling. So at least 8 days there's a requirement, to discuss on literary theories on each theory. I think there are a lot of concepts, authors, and in what way that particular theories can be linked to some other theory, or in what way, from where the history, roots. These are all the things we have to discuss. Unless and until we'll not discuss that one, I think that remains incomplete. So I don't know how far I can go. I'll try my level best to do justice with whatever I uh, talk on today, and maybe upcoming classes, if at all uh, the time permits us. So yesterday I began my talk with the introduction to literary criticism, and we also discussed the forms of literary criticism. Then after that, a little bit superficial touch of functions of literary criticism, and we began the literary criticism from the ancients. Although ancient literary criticism or classical literary criticism hasn't been made as a nomenclature of your syllabus, but still, I just told you that unless we understand the past, we cannot understand the present. So that's the reason I started uh, yesterday's talk with focus on Plato, and after that Aristotle, and after that I discussed on Horace, and after that I touched I gave just touching, we can say, examples and the concepts of Longinus, and and after that we shifted back to this Renaissance period where I talked on Sydney and Ben Jonson. So today we'll carry on with neoclassical criticism, where we'll begin with John Dryden. So John Dryden, whom Dr. Johnson calls as the father of English criticism, and he as a writer, he has taught us to determine upon the principles of the merits of composition, the principles and the merits of composition, what exactly to be followed, what not to be followed, right? What to do and what not to do. These all the things, what in a very detailed way he explains in his critical works. So Dryden is the first master of literary criticism. That is, being this particular statement was given by T.S. Eliot. And Sydney, Ben Jonson, you have got, of course, in Renaissance period, where they wrote criticism, but their criticism is occasioned compositions. They were not planned one. Whereas Dryden, if you take Dryden, his criticism has got a purpose and plan. So this is the difference between Sydney Ben Jonson, and on the other hand, we have got Dryden. Dryden planned and he had a purpose, whereas Ben Jonson and Sydney did not have purpose at all. In a systematic way, Dryden propagated his theory of criticism. So his particular work, we have got many critical works he has written, and he's the first person to introduce the word examine. Examine means critically analyze the thing. He's the first person to introduce the word examine, and he's called as a comparative and historical critic. It's comparative and historical critic, and the term for the first time it was used by Collier and sorry, not Collier, is Cornell. Corneille is a French, we can say, dramatist whom Dryden keeps as a model, and even he followed Cicero, especially as far as the oration is concerned. And of course, he has written a number of books, and the very important books that I just want to remind you of is nothing but that is Defense of an Essay of Dramatic Poesy. It's a very important seminal work, and Parallel of Poetry and Painting, and we have got Preface to Fables, and Essay on Satire. We have got Heroic Tragedy, right? Essay on Heroic Tragedy, essays on fables. So one by one, we'll just quickly have a glance over what all the things we see, and uh, majorly we'll focus more on dramatic poesy, what he has written, essay on dramatic poesy. So essay on satire, it is a preface to his translation of juvenile satire. So once again, I just would like to remind you, let me connect Dryden with Horace. Horace. Why is it called as a neo? And yesterday I told you that classicism that we find over there in which is a Roman term, and neoclassicism is a British term. And this fellow Pope and Dryden, they followed classicism. I mean to say the period of Horace, who was who lived over there in the Augustus period, which was called as the golden age of Roman literature. And he's a classicist, Dryden, of course, and he followed Horace. And when the question of satire comes, he privileges Horace over Juvenal. He doesn't keep juvenile satire on par with Horace, just because he followed Horace. So in essay on satire, keep in mind, he privileges Horace over juvenile satire. Right. So next one, essay on heroic tragedy. It was written as a preface to the conquest of Granada, that his work, and it shows the Dryden as a theorist of a heroic play. And a very important thing, what I just would like to mention over here is that Dryden prefers rhyme to blank verse. This is a very important point I'm making. I think you have to keep in mind the rhyme is given more importance than blank verse. And this particular work, that is essay on heroic tragedy, so there we find that he calls the heroic play as an imitation of a heroic poem. And here there is a theme of love and war. They are the main themes of this particular work. And there is nothing called pity and kind of fear, right? What we find with Aristotle, right? So this we have to keep in mind as far as essay on heroic tragedy is concerned. So one more very important seminal work that I would like to focus now, that is nothing but essay on dramatic poesy, and it was published in the year 1668. He writes it to the readers, and his aim was to vindicate the honor of English writers from the French writers. So, at this particular moment of time, why this particular work was written is that Samuel Saubier, he had visited England and he attacked on the stage of we can say the English stage. He attacked on, so to give a befitting reply to him, that he has written this work, essay on practical dramatic poesy. So he discussed 5 ideas in this book. First, the merits of the ancient and the modern poets. Second, comparative study of English and French drama. It's just because what's his name? That is Samuel Saubier. He was a French writer. He came over there to England and attacked English state. That's the reason in order to give a befitting reply to him, he has written this particular work, and that is the reason he compares English drama with French drama. The study of Elizabethan drama compared with Dryden's time, and he questioned the dramatic rules found by the ancients. See, take the example of even Aristotle. He questions the 3 unities, right? Questions the substitution of rhyme for blank verse. I have already told you that he preferred rhyme to blank verse. So there are 4 speakers in this work. Lycidius, second one Critus, third one is Eugenius, and Neander. I don't want to go detail into this particular work. It's just because a lot to speak on the other topics and other literary critics. So it was written during the plague year, and this particular essay was written at his father-in-law's house. And this whole essay, that what exactly we find is that it is in dialogic form, where 4 people are there on a badge, and they are talking to each other. They're discussing different kinds of issues regarding literature. And here he says that he promises the modern over the ancient. So this is a very important point. I think we have to jot it down, where he says that moderns, right, are far better than the ancients. So till now, although he is a classicist, he followed Horace, but still he gives a very contrary statement that he says that he privileges moderns over the ancients. He even justifies the tragic comedy in support of Shakespeare. Shakespeare practiced and even violated the rules or the 3 unities of Aristotle. So, and even he has written many other works. Of course, I do not want to just go in detail into it. We'll directly switch on to the minor. The other day, you were asking me to just speak a little on minor critics as well. So 3 important minor critics I think we have to remember in neoclassical period. One is Thomas Rhymer, second one is John Dennis, and the third one is Jeremy Collier. I don't want to go once again details into it, just because hell lot of the topics are there. I'm very much apprehensive whether I would complete the whole. I'm going to say the topics I can just speak on. I am not very much confident enough to talk on all the things in 1 hour only. It's just because still many things are yet to be discussed. So next major literary critics of this particular time is Joseph Addison, and his very famous The Spectator and the Tatler. And the very major thing that we have to remember here is that he examined Paradise Lost, and he appreciates Milton's Paradise Lost, and he divides Paradise Lost in four sections. Gives a title. One is fable, the second one is character, the third is sentiment, and the fourth one is diction. So these are all the factual information I think you have to observe on when you're, especially as far as examination is concerned. So this is Edison. We have to remember only two things: that Spectator and Tatler, right? And he appreciated Paradise Lost and divided Paradise Lost in four sections. The next one is Alexander Pope. He followed the same bandwagon of Dryden, and he was also a classicist. He followed once again Horace. He has, of course, written a number of critical works. Essay on criticism. You've got Preface to Shakespeare's Plays, right? Preface to Shakespeare, written by Dr. Johnson, and Preface to Shakespeare Plays, written by Pope. Don't get confused. Dr. Johnson wrote Preface to Shakespeare, and Pope wrote Preface to Shakespeare's Plays. There's a difference, right? Art of Sinking and imitation of the epistles of Horace to Augustus, and Preface to Translation of the Iliad, and the very minor work that is Letters. So we'll just speak on very quickly superficial information about very few important works I just want to focus on. The first one is Essay on Criticism, written in 1711. And this particular essay, right, was written when he was just 23. And he considers four people as his guides. One is Aristotle, second one is Horace, and the third one is Quintilian, and the fourth one is Longinus. Right? So he also talks on. He says in one particular situation, he says that especially the decorum of Horace he followed a lot, and he tries to reiterate and suggest all the writers to follow the established order which has come down from the ancients. And that is the reason why he says so, which is because why he gives importance to ancient critics is that he in his one particular statement that we can understand, he says, let me quote: the ancient rules discovered, not devised, are natural still, but nature methodized. It's a very famous statement given by Pope here, just because in support of ancient critics. So, Preface to Shakespeare's Plays that he wrote in 1925, Pope recognized Shakespeare's power over the passion. So, what kind of the hold he has got on passion that he appreciates a lot. So, one more work that is famous, his famous dialogue, right? And this essay criticized by Thomas T. Quincy. He is famous for Confession of an Opium Eater. And Pope, of course, used wit. He privileged wit over the emotions. And many things he has written. I don't want to go once again deeper into it and switch on to the next literary critic, that is Dr. Samuel Johnson. He's a person who is standing at the threshold of, on one side, you have got neoclassical period. On the other side, we have got romantic period. His ideas are some other way blended ideas. Who's Dr. Johnson's? He's neither classicist nor a romantic. In a between, we can just call it as a transitional kind of a critic. It's just because he was against of intellectual movement. Intellectualism, he was against of. He opposed intellectualism. Whereas, remember, Dryden and Pope supported intellectualism. And he privileged, and even he condemned enlightenment. He condemned enlightenment. And condemning enlightenment is nothing but condemning Kant, Immanuel Kant. Right? So Dr. Johnson's criticism was a subordinate activity to imaginative literature. And his famous periodical, I think you know, the Rambler, where we find his theory of poetry and criticism as well. And his kind of a criticism, whatever the criticism he propagated, This particular criticism is called the biographical criticism. It's quite contrary to objective criticism. So biographical criticism is subjective criticism, where we understand any kind of an author in our own way, in our own subjective point of view. Understood? So his only novel that we can find is Restless. And Johnson was not a neoclassicist. I have already told you that he's neither the neoclassic nor a romantic. In between is a blended kind of a thought that we find with Dr. Johnson. And he criticized Tom Jones. And one more thing I would like to remind you of is that Dr. Johnson is a staunch follower of Plato, because Plato was a didactic, a critic who didacticism for him was, I'm going to say, greater than pleasure or aestheticism. In a similar way, we find the same thing with Dr. Johnson. He has got blended kind of a criticism where you have got the echoes of new classical criticism, and we have got the echoes of even romantic criticism. So he commented on Tom Jones. There is a novel written by Henry Fielding. He said that he gave a statement that Tom Jones lacked sexual morality. He also criticized Shakespeare, that Shakespeare sacrificed virtue to convenience, and it's a famous statement. And Shakespeare pleases more than instructs. So one more, we can say, important statement that he gave. So his edition of Shakespeare, he worked on this particular work for 9 years, and it was published in the year 1765. And there are many n number of quotations that I think you have to remember. As far as the works are concerned, you have to even keep in mind, you have to mug up what the famous statements given by a critic on some other critic or some other work, right? So that also is very much important. So his edition of Shakespeare that he worked on for 9 years and published in 1765. The major work that I just would like to discuss over here is that Lives of the English Poets. This particular work, that he was 68 when he wrote this one, and he discusses or he talks on 52 leaves of the poets, or he talks on the works and the or their lives, right, of these all the poets, and this has been published in 3 volumes. Two poets that he discusses on are the pre-restoration period, like Milton. You have got his piece on even on Cowley, and the other 50 that what he talks on are the post-restoration poets. So this is a very important point you keep in mind. It took 4 years to complete this work, and even he omitted 2 important writers just because he doesn't consider them to be great: George Herbert and Robert Herrick, that is metaphysical poet. So he evaluates Lycidas, Milton's elegy, and he says that it suffers from some mistakes. He personally considers that Milton did not write Lycidas in a proper way. It has got many problems. Their Pope appreciated Paradise Lost. On contrary to it, Dr. Johnson did not appreciate Paradise Lost. He called Paradise Lost as Paradise of Fools. He did not appreciate Milton at all because he privileged, we can say, he was against of the intellectualism. That's the reason he condemns and he rejects, right, Paradise Lost, and says that Paradise Lost is a paradise of fools, right? So the main thing what we can take from Dr. Johnson is that the judgment is grounded on the foundation of morality. Morality is the main subject for Dr. Johnson. He doesn't believe in pleasure. He doesn't believe in aestheticism. Although his one leg that we can find over there in romantic period, and the other in the neoclassical. So in a kind of a blended kind of an ideas he had that we have to keep in mind. So now we have completed neoclassical period where we have gone through Dryden, Pope, and Dr. Johnson. Now we'll slowly move on to romantic criticism, And in this, we'll begin with William Wordsworth, a famous poet. His famous work, that is Preface to Lyrical Ballads, for the first time it was published in 1800, and initially it contained 7,000 words, and later he re-revised it, and it was published in the year 1802, and this particular revision had 3,000 more words added into it. And he has written some other works also. They are not that much important, and his main contribution to English criticism is that he spoke on poetic diction. This is the main contribution of Wordsworth to the field of literary criticism. Wordsworth's aim was to write preface that he wanted to give a befitting reply to those all the people who started to question on what basis that you have written lyrical ballads. So what made you to write such kind of poems which are totally different from, which have violated age-old rules and regulations, the decorum, the framework, which have been suggested and laid down by the ancient classicists and Renaissance poets. For the first time, different kinds of poems were introduced. That's the reason. That's the reason. That's the reason people started to ask him, "What is the theory of poetry of you? You just explain to us." So that's the reason he came up with, right? He came up with a theory of poetry where he talks on the poetic diction, and that is the main contribution of Wordsworth. That's why I think there's a famous statement: "There's no necessary difference between the language of prose and poetry." It's the famous statement. And one more famous statement of Wordsworth: "Poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, recollected in tranquility," which was later attacked by T.S. Eliot. Right? We have to connect the ideas. Wordsworth says, "Overflow of powerful feelings, recollected in tranquility." Whereas T.S. Eliot says it's not the recollection of the emotions, but he says that escape from the emotions. Theory of depersonalization, right? Dissociation of sensibility. These are all the ideas, and we have to connect. So here he says that speaks about the theme of the preface that we have to keep in mind. That is his argument against poetic diction, that which has been the bombastic language which was suggested by the classicist critics and even the Renaissance critics, right? The language before Romanticism, the language which was propagated by Pope, Dryden, even Aristotle, even Plato, they tried to give a kind of a lot of focus on language. They asked the poet to use a bombastic and embellished language, ornamental language, right? And it's just because of that, the literature of that time, it was, we can say, limited to aristocratic families only. It did not reach to the lame people, the common people. And that is why there's a shift, right? I think that at this particular moment of time, we have to remember that 1789, a great event took place, that is French Revolution, which talks about equality, fraternity, where it wants everything, right, to be given to each and everyone. Everybody is equal. That's what equality talks about. Then why literature should be limited to only aristocratic families? That was the question. And that is the main spirit of Romanticism, where everybody is equal. So that's the reason he propagated the theory of his theory, especially focusing on poetic diction. He said that, a famous statement, that there is no necessary difference between the language of prose and poetry. So his essay is supplementary to the essay of 1815, and Wordsworth writes that poetry is an escape from the hard reality of life. The same thing is being echoed over there in Keats' Negative Capability. So characters of the poem must be people of rural area, rustic people, common language, and the language of the poetry should be the common language. It should be the language of the common people, and the setting should be common. The theme should also be common. These are all the things, that he talked on. But the problem is that in some of the poems, like Lucy poems, he practices whatever he said, whatever he preached. he practiced in some of the poems. Whereas we do not find the same theory, that what he proposed or propagated, that we did not find in poems like Tintin Abbey, where a very embellished kind of a language is being used, right? So this is a problem with Wordsworth. That's the reason many people, many later critics have attacked him. Even his own friend Coleridge attacked him, and he deferred that he said something else. He wrote Biographia Literaria, where he propagated and attacked his own theory of poetry and attacked Wordsworth. So that I think we have to remember. So this is it about Wordsworth, and slowly we'll move on to S.T. Coleridge. His critical work, very major and very important work that we have to keep in mind is two works. One is a Biographia Literaria, and the second one, what we have got, lectures on Shakespeare. But for us, what is important is Biographia Literaria. Both Coleridge and Wordsworth, they walked on the same way, but later they got themselves divided on their propagations. So Coleridge later, of course, they were very close friends. They used to walk together in the evening. They used to muse a lot, right, on different issues in literature. But later Coleridge, somewhere, he took some other way rather than following Wordsworth. So Coleridge also, but the thing is that, of course, I cannot privilege Coleridge over Wordsworth. This is because even Coleridge has been attacked by many critics that he was a plagiarist. He copied all the ideas from German philosopher, that is Schiller. Keep this one in mind. He's also called as a plagiarist. Coleridge, the ideas what he propagated, they are not his own ideas. He has plagiarized. He took it from the German, right? German critic, Schiller, or Schilling, sorry, not Schiller, it's Schilling. So let's move on. He was also influenced by German philosopher, that is Immanuel Kant, and academic philosopher. Immanuel Kant also influenced, he was influenced by transcendentalism, once again, transcendentalism of American literature. We can just connect. So even we have got I. Richards. For him, he just appreciates him a lot, and he compares him with Aristotle and Longinus. And I. Richards says that Coleridge is the founding father of modern criticism. And I have already told you that Schilling is a person whom he has followed. He was a German philosopher. His ideas were copied, and that the reflection of Schilling that we find on in Biographia Literaria. So quickly, we'll have a factual information about Biographia Literaria. Biographia Literaria, first it was called as Autobiography of Biographia Literaria. But later, remember, it's a very important point I'm making. J.K. Gooch, I don't know how it has to be pronounced. He changed the title, that is Autobiography of Biographia Literaria, to Biographia Literaria. And this particular work was published in the year 1815. His friend J.K. Gooch gave him money to write, just because he was a patron. And this particular work has got 22 chapters, 1 to 13. First, it was written in the first volume, and that was completed in 1815. And it contains a philosophical theories, 1 to 13. It contains philosophical theories. And chapter 14 to 22, where we find the real propagation of the theory of Coleridge. And here in these particular chapters, that we find that he is attacking his own friend, that is William Wordsworth. So there are two important terms which we have to keep in mind as far as Coleridge is concerned: fancy and imagination. Right? Fancy imagination, that I have already told you that he is a plagiarist, that he copied fancy and imagination from Schilling. He was a great admirer of Schilling. He copied those ideas, that is fancy and imagination. Fancy for Coleridge is not a creative power, but it is imagination that creates new shapes, and form of beauty by fusing and unifying different experience of external world. So he privileges imagination over fancy. So imagination for him is holistic, and fancy for him is associative power. Just in support, it is. That's all. And fancy is a mechanical power, and imagination is a chemical mixture. Did you understand? And most of his ideas are German. That I have already told you that he copied Schilling. And further, he divides once again fancy into primary and secondary, right? Elementary first, or elementary or primary, that can be right called as it is. He says that it is merely a power of receiving impressions of the external world through the senses. And he says that it is a power of perceiving the objects of the sense, both in their parts as a whole. It is an involuntary act of mind, and primarily is universal, and secondary is selective. So he compares primary and secondary imagination. He calls primary as universal, it is there with everyone, but secondary is a very selective. People have got this kind of a capacity. So he says many things about it, but I don't want to focus more on it. It's just because you can just go through this particular work. You go through primary and secondary imagination, go through fancy over there, and focus more on biography literaria. So now let us quickly move on to the next romantic critic, that is P.B. Shelley, and his famous work that quickly I'll just talk on, that is Defense of Poetry, published in 1821. This pamphlet is reply to Thomas Love Peacock, one particular work he has written, that is Four Ages of Poetry, and it was published in 1820. Peacock was a person who attacked poetry. What he said is in that particular work is, a poet in our time is a semi-barbarian in a civilized community. It's a very severe attack on poets. He said, poet in our times, poets are barbarians, right, in a civilized community. And he says that poetry essentially the most worthless of all intellectual exercises. Right, Stephen Gosson, once again here, right? That is Love Peacock, and to defend poetry, right? There's a culture and the counterculture that goes on, right? The same thing, the concept of Marx, right? So someone comes and attacks poetry, and someone is there to reply to him. So this game is on every time, in every age. This game is on, right? So here Shelley writes that poetry is the highest of all human powers, because more directly creative than any other art. So he privileges poetry over other arts. He says that poetry is greater than any other, we can say, the discipline. He says Shelley accepts Plato's theory that all things in the world are only copies of the divine idea. Same thing, Plato, he said that there is an ideal world where there are ideas, and the ideas of that particular world have been copied over here in the real world, and out of which what comes is the art. And he's a staunch follower of Plato, and he claims that's a very important point I'm making. Poetry is beyond copies. Poetry is something which is not there somewhere in the ideal world. It is there in this real world. And poetry does have its status, a standard which does not have any kind of a connection to copying. What he tries to say is that poetry is the highest form of art. He of course he supports Plato, but he even contradicts by saying that he supports Plato by saying that everything whatever is around us is a copy of the ideal state. But on the other hand, he also says that poetry is greater than any other art, like painting. You have got music, you have got. And he also says that poetry, it is not a copy of the ideal world. It exists over here in the real world itself. It's a creative, we can say, it's a creative work which is not copied from an ideal state. So this is what exactly we have to remember about Shelley. Then moving on, next romantic critic that I just would like to talk on is John Keats. So he has written in total 240 letters to his brothers, right? And these letters were written between 1817 to 1820. These are all the dates and the factual information I think we have to keep in mind. And very important thing, what we can notice in Keats' theory of poetry is nothing but a very important term, that is negative capability. Negative capability he describes as the capacity of human beings to transcend and revise their context. Right? The term is vitally used by the poets, philosophers. It establishes the poet's own will and individuality. Now, you may ask me, what is negative capability? For example, you take the example of Keats himself. He has written Ode to the West Wind, where he says, he muses on the topic, that is mortality. And when he couldn't find the answers, right? Mortality is irresolvable issue. Why do we die? We do not know. Why do we die? We do not know. And after that, what is there? We do not know. A person who is born, why he has to die? This particular question, nobody has answered. And that is what exactly makes human conditions and keeps the human being in a mysterious position. It brings back to mysterious position. We think that everything is clear for us. Nothing is opaque for us. But what is the reality? We are in a mysterious world, from where one other day we have to go. Right? We have got a number of doubts about what exactly would happen after death. Right? One has to die some other way. It's a nature's law. Right? Mortality is a question. It's just because why he talked a lot on mortality, just because he died in his 25th or 26th age. I'm in a confusion. He died very early because he had tuberculosis. He used to trouble him a lot. That is the reason he used to have gloomy kind of ideas, and even negative capability is one out of them. He talked a lot on mortality. Mortality is irresolvable issue. That's what exactly he talks over there in that particular poem. And what he says is that negative capability, he says that it's a very good capacity. Right? Negative capability is a very good capability. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is that when you have got n number of negative ideas around you, and when you cannot resolve some of the issues, and you are in a mystery, in a doubts, or we can say in a muddled state, or in a confusion. It's a negative atmosphere which is created around you, and you have to start believing that this is also beautiful. Negative, in finding beauty in negativity, escaping from the emotions which have been the constructs of the context, the construct of the context. Once again, right? Construct is a word. Once again, we can relate to structuralism. Everything is construct, and it's a construct of the context. Right? Ferdinand de Saussure. Right? So we are the byproducts of the context. Text is the offspring of the context. That's what exactly we can. So from here we can smell. We can smell the beginning of the modernism, where he rejects the context. Context is the established order. Straight away, by using this particular term, negative capability, he goes against the established conventions. Poet, it's just because he feels that poet has his own independence, freedom he has got. He has to decide who other people are, who are they? Who are they to tell the poet that you have to do this and you have to do that? Poet has his own will. He has his own freedom. and he has every right to reject the context. So this is the beginning. This is the beginning of modernism. It's the beginning or the edge, the roots of modernism. Keats is the, I think, to an extent, I can say that he's a path blazer. He's a pioneer who blazed the path of modernism. Later, the same idea is used by T.S. Eliot. Once again, let me connect. T.S. Eliot, theory of depersonalization. He talks in a similar way, negative capability, right? So Keats rejects those all the formulaic theories, and this particular milestone that paves the way for modernism. Did you understand? Right? Why he used this particular term, especially to criticize Coleridge and appreciate Shakespeare. Right? I don't want to go deeper into it, just because a lot to be discussed yet. So he also says that perception of the world is limited. But it is the poet who has got the capability, who can go beyond these limitations. For poet, sky is the limit, because his capacity can take him anywhere. He does not have any kind of a barriers. There is no circumference for which is set for a poet. Poet, when he thinks, when he writes, he's beyond the boundaries. He is beyond the barriers, because he has his own free will, who is never bothered about the framework, who is never bothered of the decorum which has been set and led by the ancient and the classical critics. So this is what exactly we understand. It's a very beautiful theory of I'm going to say poetry that he propagates over there. So in Romanticism, we discussed romantic literary criticism, that we discussed on important critics like Wordsworth, where he gave importance to poetic diction. And the second one, P.B. Shelley. And the third one, where P.B. Shelley talks on, I'm going to say that he attacks a Peacock, that he called poetry is the most, or is the worthless, right, exercise. And he attacked, and he privileged poetry over other arts, and he followed Plato. And we also talked on Keats' negative capability that just now. And now let's move on to Victorian criticism, that is 19th century criticism. So 1837 is the main important milestone from where Victorian criticism, when Victoria ascended the throne. And literary criticism of this particular period is divided into three stages. First stage from 1835 to 1900, and the second 1860 to 1880, and the third stage 1880 to 1990. In the first period, you see that there is a decline of literary criticism. There is, if at all you just try to check it out, you do not have any kind of a major critic over there. There is no outstanding criticism that we can call it as worth mentioning, right? Of course, we have got some historians like Macaulay is there. We have got Carlyle is there. J.S. Mill is there. But they are all continental philosophers. So philosophy has got two branches. So continental philosophy, and the second is analytical philosophy. So Lord Macaulay and Carlyle and J.S. Mill, they talked a lot on social issues. Continental philosophy deals with the social issues. Analytical philosophy talks about metaphysical things. It analyzes the ideas. That is why it is called as analytical philosophy. And the continental philosophy, it talks about, it engages itself to the social issues. So this is how this first stage, where you do not find a good criticism, I'm going to say good criticism or an outstanding critic that we can worth mention. In the second stage, what we have got, there is one particular movement is Art for Art's Sake by Matthew Arnold and Ruskin. And the third stage, we find Walter Pater and Oscar Wilde. Let us quickly move on to the next critic of this particular age is Matthew Arnold. He's a cultural critic, and he's the model for T.S. Eliot. and even for new critics, and for even for malice. So he has written a number of works, right? And important thing only I just to discuss. I just want to mention what are the works that he has written, and uh, which one is important. That I'll talk a little bit briefly, not in detail. So the works are preface to the poems published in 1853 on translating Homer, his views on grand style, essay in criticism, essay on criticism, Pope, essay in criticism, Arnold. In and on, this is the difference. On Pope, in Arnold. So on the study of Celtic literature, the next one, culture and anarchy. This is a very important seminal work that we'll quickly have a glance over later. And Saint Paul and Protestantism. This is also yet another work. Literature and dogma. One more work. God and the Bible. Right? These are the works. The main important works that I just would like to talk on, that is nothing but essay in criticism and culture and anarchy a little we can just talk on. So Victorian period is the period where industrial revolution took place. There was a great exhibition. I think you know it very well, this particular event in history of English literature. And one more important and major event that took place in Victorian period is 1859. It's a landmark, and that changed the thought process of the people. That is 1859, Origin of the Species, written by Charles Darwin. Till 1859, people believed in creationism, that we have been created. But science came with a breakthrough, dismantling or turning the popular belief that we were created. It turned it upside down and said that he propagated the theory of evolution, that is Darwin, and said that we were not created, we got evolved. And he traced back that we came from monkeys. And this particular statement of the theory that he propagated, it changed the way and paved the way for modernism. Rather than. So this particular event, somehow the way it affected the literature, the thought process of literary critics, the thought process of writers, the authors, and it even changed the mentality of the citizens of England, not only of England, of Europe. So church said that we were created. People for the first time started questioning more and more. Of course, it started in Renaissance, so people started questioning from the Renaissance period itself. Modernism has got trace over there itself, but still is right. We are now, it is an indication that we are coming closer to a new world, that is modern world. This particular work is a seminal work. I think one has to read. I always suggest my students and whoever my friends know everything that we have to read other disciplines as well. Biology is very much important, of course. Now we have to talk on origin of species as well, what exactly it propagates. Survival of the fittest, he talks on. He says the famous statement, right? We should not just only be the frogs of a well, where we only read Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Shelley. We have to read some theories in physics. We have to read even the theories over there in mathematics. As far as literary criticism and literary theories are concerned, you have to read everything. Your approach should be interdisciplinary. You have to read each and every discipline to understand these all the concept in a proper way. So I hope you are all there. Are you all there? Am I audible to you all? Can somebody give me a reply? Okay. No problem. Thank you so much. Let me move on. So Charles Darwin I was talking about, 1859 is the main important year. That we cannot miss it out. And from here, one more movement that began is nothing but Newman's Oxford movement, right? Arnold is famous for his work that is Scholar Gypsy, an elegy taken from the Vanity of Dogmatism on the death of the medieval scholar Theocritus. Arnold was a Democrat. He was a nationalist. Keep in mind this one, this particular word, nationalist, is very much famous now. An academic critic. There are other academic critics as well. And he was also an academic philosopher. Like you've got Immanuel Kant. Right? His philosophy led us to some, I'm going to say, it paved a different kinds of ways. It just led to the new beginning of a new literature or new criticism, that is modern criticism, which is quite different from the traditional criticism. So what exactly his philosophy says? His philosophy stresses on human nature and, very important, culture. He says culture is not personal development, it's a social force. Arnold says it's a social force. You're a part of the culture. He described culture in his first essay, that is Culture and Anarchy. So according to him, he commented on Shakespeare and Milton. According to him, Shakespeare and Milton are the great, we can say, poetical classics, but Dryden and Pope are not poetical classics at all. He condemns, he rejects Dryden and Pope. Right. His famous term, I think you know it very well, touchstone method. Touchstone method is related to the short passages and single lines that he takes and compares it with the present. To compare it with the present, to understand the value of the same thing, same echo, right, of T.S. Eliot's tradition and individual talent. The tradition has to be brought down. The tradition should be a model for us. And he takes some purple patch kind of a passages from Homer, Dante, even Milton, and even from Shakespeare, some passages takes and compares it with the present author to know the value of it. Touchstone is nothing but to compare. Like a goldsmith compares whether the gold is fake or the original. He compares it to the original gold. In a similar way, a tradition has to be brought down. The same idea is being echoed by T.S. Eliot in Tradition and Individual Talent. Did you understand? So, he uses the touchstone method to decide the value of the present author's work. He criticized Chaucer. He even criticized Burns because they lacked high seriousness. Right? Matthew Arnold wrote the preface to the poems in 1853, and a very important work, that is Function of Criticism at the present time. Right? So many things are that I have to talk on Arnold, because it's a constraint of time. Already 1 hour is already over, and Professor Akshay Yadi sir has already instructed me to just to talk on these all the critics for 1 hour, at most 1 hour 10 minutes. So 1 hour is already over. 10 more minutes I'll talk on. So you can just complete literary criticism, this particular unit. I don't know. Let us see what exactly I can do. So Matthew Arnold called Shelley a beautiful intellectual angel, but beating in a void his luminous wings in vain. He's intellectual, but he was born in at a wrong time. Understood? He was not fit for his age. That's what he said. You've got many works of Arnold. For T.S. Eliot, for him, he's a model. Arnold was an academic critic. Even T.S. Eliot is an academic critic. Eliot wrote an essay on Arnold, and the title of the essay is Arnold and Pater. Right? For Matthew Arnold, Carlyle was a moral desperado, and Ruskin for him was eccentric. Did you understand? And even he even commented on Swinburne. He called him as the pseudo Shelley. He acted as Shelley, but he is not in reality. And for him, poetry is the criticism of life. It's a famous definition of poetry that he has given. So, and one more thing that we have to remember about Arnold is that the main purpose of critical power, he believes, is to see object as in itself it really is. Did you understand? It's objective criticism rather than subjective criticism. Romantics, they were subjective more. Whereas Arnold, right, is an objective critic. He believed that the power of the critical power, the work of the critical power is to see things as they are in themselves. Understood? So one more writer of this particular time, Walter Pater, he practiced aestheticism along with Oscar Wilde, right? So he wrote one particular autobiography, that is Marius the Epicurean. Very important work that you have to remember. Pater is associated with aesthetic movement, I have already told you. He believes that worship of beauty is the highest goal of life. Now, once again, let us connect these ideas. Plato believed that he was a didactic critic who believed in morality, who held the view that the main aim of literature is to teach. Even Dryden believed in it, Pope believed in it, even Dr. Johnson believed in it. And this fellow, Walter Pater, and aestheticism, the roots of aestheticism, once again, let us straight back to Aristotle. Aristotle, as Plato privileged reason over emotions, but Aristotle kept the reason as well as emotion, he has set them parallelly. He gave equal importance to them. The same, and one more thing that Aristotle says is that the value of the main aim of literature or poetry is to teach and delight. But whereas here is totally contrary as far as aesthetic critics are concerned. The main aim of literary criticism is to delight. The goal of life, the goal of literary work is to worship beauty, and that particular beauty should give us pleasure, a hedonistic kind of principle, we can say. So aestheticism is a movement originated in France in 1830, and the pioneers of the movement, you know it very well, Théophile Gautier, Charles Baudrillard, and Robert Flaubert. And Robert Flaubert's work, Madame Bovary, it's a very famous work. And Oscar Wilde, of course, we cannot forget him, right? Oscar Wilde rejected Matthew Arnold because he believed in objective and aim to teach something, to convey morality to the readers. So that's the reason he rejects him. Even he rejects Ruskin, he rejects Carlyle. The main motto of the movement, remember this very important statement, the function of art is to provide pleasant sensations, and the critic should enjoy these sensations. The famous statement given by Oscar Wilde. And aestheticism believed that art or form is more content than, art is more content than the form. Once again, let me connect it, this particular idea. It says, aestheticism believed that art is more content than the form. Here, form is negated. The content is being privileged over the form. When I connect this idea to new criticism or formalism, they say that form is important. Form is important. If they privilege form over the content, they reject the content. They reject biographical criticism, the biographical approach. They reject historical approach. For a poem is the only, for them, poem is the only, the text is the only thing which is very much important rather than the author. Did you understand? So they're quite contrary to new criticism. Traditional criticism was like this only, where author was kept in the center. The content which is written by author, and he echoes himself over there in the content. And when someone is privileging content over the form, then it means that they are giving importance to author. Understood? This is what exactly we understand by aestheticism. They say that the content is more important than the form itself. Right? So Swinburne's very important work that you have to remember, Poems and Ballads. Now let's directly switch on to Swinburne is a minor critic of this particular period. So in this 19th century, we have discussed about the critics, especially Matthew Arnold, Walter Pater, and we talked on aestheticism, Oscar Wilde, and their beliefs. Now directly move on to the edge, right, which divides, which is a kind of which brings a division in between the traditional criticism and the new criticism. On that particular threshold, who is standing? T.S. Eliot. Of course, he was a staunch ally of Matthew Arnold. But from where a new kind of a criticism begins, a new kind of a writing begins, a new kind of a cultural movement begins. You got modernism, structuralism. Postmodernism, post-structuralism. They go hand in hand. Modernism and postmodernism are cultural movements. Keep in mind, this is a very important point I am trying to convey to you. Modernism and postmodernism are cultural movements, whereas structuralism and post-structuralism are theoretical movements. Theoretical and cultural. From here, from T.S. Eliot, begins, there is a transition in the field of literary criticism. We are moving, he is standing at the door of modern criticism, which means a new criticism, and 19th century, that he is a follower of Arnold. He has written a number of work like Tradition and Individual Talent. You have got Poetry and Drama, Function of Criticism, once again, Function of Criticism at present time, Arnold, Function of Criticism by T.S. Eliot, the English Metaphysical Poets, a number of works he has written. And three important points that we have to keep in mind, terms we have to keep in mind: dissociation of sensibility, unification of sensibility, and one more, theory of depersonalization. So, there's a famous statement that T.S. Eliot was a classicist in literature, a royalist in politics, and Anglo-Catholic in religion. He opposed Romanticism. So, opposing Romanticism means opposing the idea of subjective criticism. Opposing Romanticism is what? Is opposing subjective criticism. And he's giving importance to objective criticism. That is art for art's sake. The same thing is being echoed by Arnold. Did you understand? So he was against of the importance of human personality. Once again, let me move back to Romanticism, where they gave importance to human. Everything surrounded human. Human was the center in Romanticism, whereas now is decentering human. He says that personality human does not have any kind of a value. That is why, once again, same. Let me connect it to formalism, where poetry is important rather than the author. So in this way, we have to connect the ideas that we can understand. Everything will be clear for us. Tradition and the Talent was published in the year 1919, and this particular essay talks about the importance of tradition. Very important point I'm making over here is that to follow tradition doesn't mean that you have to follow blindly. That's what he mentions over there. T.S. Eliot mentions over there in Tradition and Talent. He says that tradition doesn't mean to blindly adhere to whatever they said, but it involves the historical sense. He uses the word historical sense. How they are related to now, to this particular point of time. How they themselves make the people of the present world to be felt. To talk about tradition is to know the history of the people who, right, blaze the paths. According to him, no poet can be understood in terms only. Poet must subordinate himself. He says, poet must subordinate himself to the tradition. To know the value of the same touchstone method. Once again, he is echoing the same thing. Touchstone method. To know the value of one particular work of art at the present time, we need to compare it with the tradition. Then, when that's what he says in tradition, the more the ancients echo in the work, the better the work would be. This is what exactly he says in his particular work. And he condemns Wordsworth theory of poetry. He doesn't believe, he rejects the theory of poetry which was proposed and propagated by Wordsworth. Wordsworth talked on poetic diction. That he said that the setting should be common. The language should be a common language. But Wordsworth is quite opposite to it. He says that no, poetry is not overflow of powerful feelings. It is escaping from the feelings. Negative capability. He is echoing the same thing. Did you understand? Eliot is known for depersonalization theory, where the poet has to sacrifice his emotions to bring out the best whatever he writes, right? So poet must forget his personal joys and sorrows. He says mind of the poet should be like a catalyst. He uses, right, Eliot quotes over there in that particular work that the experiment, oxygen, sulfur dioxide, I think you remember. The catalyst is platinum. Platinum is the writer himself. He doesn't get affected, right? You just go through it. So I don't want to discuss more on it just because a lot to be said about him yet. So he says that promotion of understanding and enjoyment of literature, right? So he promotes understanding and enjoyment both. Same, he's echoing Aristotle once again. He prescribed the qualification of a critic. Hence his criticism is called workshop criticism. Keep in mind, it's a very important point. His criticism is a workshop criticism where he experiments with feelings and emotions. Did you understand? Comparison and analysis are the tools of the critic, he says. Comparison, once again, Dryden, comparative and historical critic. Comparative critic and historical critic. Comparison and analysis are the tools of the critic. He calls Aristotle as an instance of perfect critic. Once again, the same thing. Just now I told you that he's following Aristotle because he avoids both of these defects, subjective and abstract. He's against of subjective criticism. To be against of subjective criticism means to be against of romanticism. In his hand, criticism approaches the condition of science. He's called the first scientific critic. Who? Aristotle. He's a follower of Matthew Arnold. dissociation of sensibility, association of unification of sensibility. Unification of sensibility means unification of thought and feeling, where same he's echoing the ideas of Aristotle, where he's talking even emotions and reason together. Both are important, equally placed. They're fused, rather. The best example that he gives about metaphysical poets were what's his name? Donne. He fuses abstract with the worldliness. He fuses emotion with the thought. That is why he has got admiration for metaphysical poets. That's the reason he has written metaphysical poets, a work. So he says that it is the metaphysical poets who united or fused thought and emotion together. That is the beauty of metaphysical poetry, where they're talking about the worldliness as well as abstract love. Sunny Rising, the best example of Donne, where he's talking about the worldliness, and even he's talking about the love that he's making, that he wants to make with his lover. Continue. He doesn't want any kind of a disturbance. He wants to continue with it. Two things he's talking at a time: abstract and the worldliness. Metaphysical and worldly. Both, they are fused together. That's the reason T.S. Eliot appreciates and admires metaphysical poets. So his essay Metaphysical Poetry analyzes Donne, Marvell, Vaughan, Cowley. His famous essay Hamlet and His Problems, there he mentions objective correlative. Just you go through this particular term, it's very much important. Eliot admires Dante's language. To him, Milton corrupted the language, wrote English a dead language. He attacks Milton. Who else attacks? You remember? Forgot, I think. No, Arnold, it seems. Right? Arnold or Dr. Johnson. I'm not getting this. You just go through it. You can rewind my lecture. I just forgot it in the flow. Anyways, there are many other things he has written. I don't want to go on talking on them. It's just because we do not have time. Already time is up. So I'm right now standing at the threshold of beginning of literary theories of the postmodern world. I should begin with the new criticism or the formalism, but the time is very much, we have got the constraint of the time. It's already 10 minutes more. I've been instructed already to just wind up at this particular moment of time. So if at all you have got any kind of a question, please pose over here in the comment box. Please do let me know your questions so I can just answer all the questions. If at all you have doubts and all everything, reservations, any, please do let me know. Yes. Here, thank you, Reshma SM. Definitely, I'll try my level best. What to do? The time is a constraint. That's the reason I'm not able to do it. And many of you told that to ask me to just talk on even minor critics as well. But the problem is that the constraint of the time. Let us see if at all time permits, we can just once again gather. Syllabus of 2021 is compared to 2016 is quite difficult. How do we prepare, especially drama, poetry, fiction, and literature topics in exam point of view? Okay, Dashrath sir. So I just would like to advise you is that I have already told you that there are two different scenarios. So in 2016 and 2021, there are two different faces of the same coin. But the problem is that the syllabus at that time, it was specific in nature. Now it is general in nature. So that is why the other day I advised you to follow the same strategy which you use for clearing set or net examination. So this is what exactly you have to do. You have to read in each and everything. But anyway, some nomenclatures have been mentioned. But as far as sixth and seventh unit are concerned, it is in a way appears to be there are some nomenclatures over there under those categories, that is literary criticism, literary theory. But I tell you, it is whole of criticism and whole of literary theories. No, eating like this and eating from here, the same, both being the same, right? So that is why the strategy what you followed in set examination, and as far as the question nature of asking questions also, that you have to keep in mind. I cannot guarantee that only factual based questions will be asked in this examination. Maybe in coming days, in the upcoming examination, there would be the questions that like. So that's the reason I always tell you to solve as many as questions possible. You take all the question papers of set and net examination together, and you solve all those questions. The more, that's the reason yesterday I told you, the more you solve the questions, the better your position, or you'll be in a better position to get this job. Understood? So this is my reply to Dashrath H sir. And sir, please refer to us good criticism and theory books. That definitely I'll give that. Who that is? Bomanal, H.G. Bomanal sir. Definitely sir, I'll just give you the list of the list of literary theory and criticism books. Muniraja sir, thank you so much. Could you please explain about negative capability? I have already explained to you. This was given at 5:20. Okay, no problem. So negative capability is a poet has got his own will. He rejects the established order. He rejects the context. He doesn't want to be placed over there in the context. He wants to have his own world where he is escaping from the established order. Understood? Take the example. I have given the example of a poem as well where he talks on mortality. Mortality is an irresolvable issue which places and makes a human condition to be absurd. And that absurdity itself is beautiful. I hope you're getting my point. Poet has each and every right to express himself, rather than to keep in mind that what all the frameworks, what all the decorums, rules and regulations he has to follow. No, you reject them. You have got that will. You escape from these all the things. So this is what exactly I can say. Many things are there. I just because the time is less, I may not be able to. Reshma madam, this is your answer. Please list out books where you have been referring on literary criticism. Okay, you have got many books. I have collaged different ideas. Whatever I read, just a collage. That's all. You've got Peter Barry beginning theories there. You've got Patricia Waugh. You've got M.R. Habib. And who else? Raman and Sheldon is also there. He's a very good guy. Right? He has written very in a comprehensive way. He has written, and the best book for literary criticism, that is Prasad, Introduction to Literary Criticism, that you can buy. And there are many. I'll give the list of those books. I don't know what exactly his name is. Grow Green. The syllabus is vast. How to cover? Your class is awesome. Please keep it up, sir. Thank you so much. Syllabus, of course, is vast, but somehow you have to make it. That somehow you have to go near to in getting job, and you have to put in a lot of smart efforts, rather than it's a smart work rather than a hard work. Donkey also does hard work. Still, it is called as a donkey. Anyways, we have to do a smart work rather than hard work. So this is a reply to Grow Green. I don't know what's your name, sir. Sir, your way of explaining is awesome. It's a lot of help. Thank you so much. Azim Uddin, sir, thank you so much. Any other questions, doubts? Please do let me know if any reservations are there still. Doubts are there still regarding whatever I have talked on today? As far as the theories are concerned, definitely I would be in contact with Professor Akshay Adi sir, that he asked me to just speak on those literary theories as well in the upcoming, I'm going to say, after this series of lecture gets over, then I'll communicate with him. Okay, so no questions. So can I wait still more for one more minute? If at all you have got any kind of a question, you can pose me. One more minute, I'm going to wait. If you've got any kind of a question. I don't have any kind of a channel, please. For the first time, I'm here on this online platform. And I welcome Akshay Yadi sir. He's back from his work. Sure, sure. Grow Green. I don't know. Please mention your name. Grow Green. Sir, when will be the exam? Samina Sami. I don't know. How can I? I'm not an astrologer to tell when exactly exam is. Maybe, probably it would be around March or April. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe tomorrow also. Who knows? It's KEA has to take a call. So this time negative marking is there. There are so give some tips. See, I advise. There is no universal kind of a tip that I can give. But what I know, what I understand, what I comprehend, that I can tell you. That first you attempt those all the questions which you are very much confident of. 100% you're sure. You just attempt them. The second 75% you know, but still you're in a doubt. Such kind of a questions you have to attempt. Then 50-50 kind of questions, and at the end you are not, you are when you are clueless, but still somewhere your right heart or brain, whatever you call, tells you that you have to take a call. But I suggest you not to just attempt it, just because it will definitely reduce your marks. Did you understand? So
Sir,
can you explain the debate among Lycidius, Neanderthalitis? Of course, I could have explained. Okay, Nayana, go green. Okay, thank you. So it's not possible now, just because its time is already up. Has come back.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
let us see in coming upcoming classes, if at all Shekhar Damuru sir, definitely I will speak on them as well. So thank you so much for listening to me. Let us see if at all time permit. Definitely I would be coming back and will be speaking on literary theories. I have completed literary criticism, and of course I could not touch the minor critics that you have to take care of. And as far as the major critics are concerned, I have covered almost all major critics from the beginning of the time to from Plato to T.S. Eliot. I have covered, and my classes are not enough. Keep in mind, and you have to prepare still more, work more, put in a lot of efforts. So this is it. I can say thank you so much, and I wish you all the best for upcoming year, upcoming examination, and hopes to see you all in English departments of the colleges spread across Karnataka. Thank you so much. Thank you, Akshay Yadi sir.
Thank you, sir. What can I say? I could read the comments from the listeners, and there are no words. You have just rocked the stage today. Thank you so much. But I missed your class today. I was busy in some other work, so I could not listen to you. But anyway, it is there on my channel. I will definitely listen to this lecture once again, sir. Thank you, sir, for
Most
wonderful
lovely.
explanation and it was a very detailed one.
My
And
apologies,
definitely,
sir. I could not complete. I'm going to say I could only complete literary criticism. I was on
no,
the
no problem,
threshold
sir.
of beginning of higher Richards formalism. I
Anyway,
guess because
sir,
of constraint of
tomorrow,
time, I could not complete it. But let us see if
yeah,
at all time permits. Definitely, we will come back. We will
sure,
talk
sir.
more. I tell you, literary criticism is like smoking weed, intoxication. A kind of whenever the more you dive into it, the more interest you will get. This is what exactly I have felt. I don't know what exactly your experience is.
Yeah.
It's a subjective
I,
understanding. Anyways,
yeah, yeah,
thank you so much, sir.
absolutely.
Thank you so much,
Thank you, sir.
sir.
So, if possible, we can have your next class tomorrow itself because tomorrow there was no other schedule. So, maybe if you are free tomorrow, we can meet up at 4 o'clock.
I will let you know, sir. Of course, definitely, I'll
Yeah,
let you know.
sure, please. Yes, sir.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you
sir.
so
Thank
much,
you so
sir.
much, everyone.
Yes, thank you. So, dear listeners, that's all for today's class. Hope you enjoyed this session. I can read your comments. Thank you once again to all of you.